Take a breath. Get comfortable tonight. We're unlocking a forgotten drawer in history's quiet cabinet. You might not know what's inside, but I promise it hums with stories. Not the kind with kings and crowns, but the quieter ones. The kinds lived behind walls, beneath veils, and between the lines of dusty manuscripts. You're about to slip into the rough wool of another life. The kind where your days are counted not by the sun, but by the toll of bells. And the funny thing is, you might not survive 5 minutes in her shoes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The door slams shut behind you. Not hard, but loud enough to startle something inside your ribs. It's heavy oak, older than your grandmother's grandmother, banded in iron, carved with splinters and silence. You don't have a key. You never will. Outside, the world continues. Carts rumble, dogs bark, the sun keeps moving across the sky, as if it didn't just leave you behind. Inside, there's a dampness in the air that smells like cold stone and boiled turnips. Welcome to your new life. This is not a prison, they told you. This is a refuge, a sanctuary, a place where your soul can grow wings, though no one mentioned the wings would be made of linen and rules. You're not here because you were sinful, or perhaps you were, or perhaps someone said you were. But really, you're here because someone made a decision and your opinion wasn't requested. Maybe your family couldn't afford a dowry. Maybe your father had too many daughters. Maybe your mother once dreamed of joining a convent herself, and now sees you as her second chance. You're given a cell. Don't be fooled by the word. It's not as romantic as it sounds. There's a straw mattress on a wooden plank, a jug of water, a rough blanket that smells like sheep. Your window is a hole the size of your fist, and through it you see nothing but another wall. Privacy? No. There's always someone nearby, even if you can't see her. Someone coughing, someone muttering, Hail Marys, someone snoring like she swallowed a small bear. The first sound you learn to fear is the bell. It rings in the dark. It rings again when you've just managed to sleep. It rings when your knees ache from prayer, and again when your back aches from labor. It tells you when to rise, when to eat, when to confess, when to scrub the floors, and when to chant in Latin that you only half understand. It rings like a heartbeat that isn't yours. Your habit, it's made of wool, coarse and gray, and it itches in places you didn't know could itch. The veil pulls at your scalp. The belt cinches your waist, not for fashion, but for penance. Your hands are red from cold water and cracked from scrubbing stone. You haven't spoken in hours, not because there's nothing to say, but because silence is a virtue here, and you're supposed to be cultivating virtue like a turnip in the monastery garden. Sometimes someone cries, not loudly, a hiccup of sound that barely breaks the rhythm of prayer. You pretend not to notice. Everyone does, because noticing means admitting that this isn't always a sanctuary. Sometimes it's a cage made of holy words and good intentions. You're told you are a bride of Christ, but no one throws rice. There's no feast, no dancing, just a ceremony where you promise to obey, to remain, to surrender. Your name is taken. A new one is given. You're not Agnes anymore. You're Sister Scholastica, or Sister Magdalene, or something equally soaked in history and devotion. The old name lingers at the back of your mind like a song you're no longer allowed to sing. And still, the world pulls at you. Through the grill, in the visiting parlor, you see your sister, now married, now a mother, now with silver rings on her fingers and a soft shawl that smells like outside. She doesn't say much. She doesn't have to. Her presence alone makes you ache, not with regret, but with the memory of choice. She had it. You did not. There are rules for everything: how to wash your hands, how to walk, how to fold your blanket with reverence as if it were a sacred cloth. There are rules for how to eat your porridge, how to lower your eyes when speaking to the prioress, how to confess even the sins you're not sure you committed. And above all, there are rules for how to let go of the life you used to want. But something grows here too, slowly, like moss in the cracks of the stone floor, a kind of clarity. You begin to understand the rhythm, the comfort in predictability, the strange peace that comes from being needed even if only to stir soup or copy psalms. Your hands remember things your heart had forgotten. Gentleness, precision, the way warm bread smells when the world is quiet. One day, you find yourself humming. Just a little tune, the kind your mother used to sing when she brushed your hair. It slips out before you can stop it. No one scolds you. One sister glances up and smiles, just barely. And that's the moment. The exact moment you realize that maybe you can belong here, not because they told you to, but because you found a way to make even confinement feel like care. The door closed behind you. Yes. But maybe not all the windows are sealed. Maybe behind these walls, something sacred still flickers. Not just duty, but defiance. The kind that wears a wimple and whispers kindness in the laundry room. And that's where we begin. Not with triumph, not with tragedy, but with a girl learning how to breathe in a world she didn't choose, finding a kind of freedom that no one expected and very few ever wrote about. You don't get much time to think in a cloister, not the kind of thinking that wanders or dreams or drifts between stars. Your thoughts are given assignments, like sheep herded into tidy pens. Today they will reflect on humility. Tomorrow, chastity. Next week, the dangers of vanity, though you haven't seen your reflection in anything clearer than a pewter dish in months. The point isn't beauty, it's discipline. A mind kept too free might start remembering how it felt to run, or to laugh, or to choose. Your days begin in the dark always. The bell calls you before the sun has remembered to rise. You shuffle to the chapel with the others, footsteps soft against stone, the hem of your habit damp from last night's chill. No one speaks. That's part of the rule. But you feel them all around you, other women, shaped by choices not entirely their own. Some old and bent like saplings in wind. Others young and wide-eyed, still hoping that obedience will eventually feel like peace. This morning, Sister Walburga forgets her place in the Psalter. It happens. Latin is not forgiving. She fumbles, and her voice falters, and the prioress gives her a look that could curdle milk. You help her turn the page. It's not a rebellion exactly, but it's the kind of softness that could get you scolded if seen as favoritism. So you keep your head bowed and your heart quietly proud. After prayers, it's chores. You are not above them. No one is. Nobility vanishes quickly when you're scrubbing latrines or scraping burnt porridge from the bottom of the pot. Your hands work without protest now. They have memorized the rhythm of toil. Scrub, rinse, repeat. It's not glamorous, but it is grounding. You start to understand why so many saints were washerwomen and cooks. Holiness, it turns out, smells like ash and barley water. The cloister garden is your favorite. Rows of herbs line the beds, like sleepy soldiers, sage-thyme lavender, even wormwood, which nobody admits to using, but somehow always needs refilled. Sister Adeltrude is in charge of the apothecary. She looks like someone who might turn into a crow if you caught her at the wrong hour. Her sleeves are stained with tinctures. Her fingers smell of garlic and vinegar. She doesn't say much, but when you ask her what valerian root is good for, she raises an eyebrow and says, "Well, that depends what you're trying to forget." That's the other thing about cloisters. Secrets seep in. They settle between mortar lines and cling to the hems of habits. You learn to notice them. The way Sister Bertil flinches at loud noises. How the lay sister, who bakes bread, never kneels fully on her left knee. The small, careful silences that say more than confession ever could. Once a week, you help copy manuscripts. Not scripture, at least not yet. You're still a novice. But you're allowed to practice with homilies, moral tales, sometimes bestiaries. You love the bestiaries. There's a kind of mischievous joy in drawing a manticore or labeling a unicorn symbol of purity while knowing full well that if you ever saw a horse with a horn, you'd likely run the other way. The ink stains your fingers and the candlelight strains your eyes, but you feel clever, almost powerful, when you finish a page without blotting it. There's a debate among the sisters about whether too much reading is good for women. One side says knowledge breeds temptation. The other says ignorance is its own kind of sin. You listen quietly, but at night you hide a scrap of parchment under your mattress. It has a poem on it, one you copied from an old book nobody checks anymore. It's about a falcon that refuses to wear its jesses. You don't tell anyone, not because it's dangerous, but because it's yours. Meals are taken in silence, except for the voice reading aloud from scripture or hagiography while the rest of you chew. You've learned to time your bites with the boring parts. The stories of martyrs who plucked out their own eyes are less appetizing when paired with boiled leeks. But it's what's available. Hunger doesn't complain when the spices are missing. In the afternoons, if the weather allows, you walk in the cloister, walk around and around the central courtyard. 4 walls, 4 paths, a square world. Your feet know every crack in the stone by now. But sometimes, walking feels like thinking. The repetition gives your mind permission to wander without breaking the rules. You think about your mother. You think about who you would have become if someone had asked you. You think about the falcon. Sometimes a priest visits. He speaks as if his every word has been weighed and blessed. He praises the sisters for their devotion, for their obedience, for their silence. He never asks what silence costs. He blesses your hands, your heads, your daily labors. He does not bless your thoughts. That's not his domain, and yet it's in your thoughts that the real sanctuary begins to form. Not in the chapel, not even in the garden, but somewhere beneath the veil, behind your closed eyes, in the flickering space where memory and imagination meet. That's where you are still free, still whole, still utterly, inconveniently alive. By sunset, the world has dimmed to a hush. Vespers ring out. The candles are lit. The psalms are sung. And once again, you lie on your straw mattress, rough wool pulled over your shoulders, ears full of quiet and fingers still faintly stained with ink. You breathe in. You breathe out. You are a woman in a cloister, limited, yes, but not erased. And maybe that's the hardest part for those outside to understand. You weren't rescued, but you weren't entirely ruined either. You were transformed, slowly, like a seed planted in shadow, still reaching for the sky. The rules are many, and they are rarely explained. You are expected to know them, or rather, to absorb them, the way a linen shift absorbs sweat in the summer heat, silently, thoroughly, and without complaint. There are rules about posture, about eye contact, about how wide your sleeves should be when chopping onions, and how much silence should settle between two questions during confession. Some rules are written, most are not. They are simply passed down like yeast in bread dough, living quiet, persistent. Today, you are mending habits, not spiritual ones, though those too are always in need of darning, but actual wool habits, fraying under the arms, torn along the hems from weeks of wear and endless kneeling. The fabric is scratchy, but familiar. You sit by the window with a basket of garments, a needle, and thread thick as crow's hair. The light slants in through the narrow glass, illuminating every uneven stitch. It's slow work, quiet, meditative, they say. You notice that one habit has been let out and taken in again and again. The seams are a palimpsest of bodies that have changed. Sister Odila used to wear this one, you think. She has grown rounder since her garden duties began. Too many apples, not enough worry. You smile to yourself, then stop. Smiling without clear reason is sometimes discouraged. Someone once said that a cloister is a place where women disappear. And perhaps in a sense it's true. Your name, your hair, your family left behind like old skins. But it's also where you sharpen. You lose what you were told you must be, and instead become something quieter, but no less precise. The self you polish here is one that has edges, even if they're not always visible to the eye. At midday, you gather herbs for the infirmary. Feverfew, yarrow, comfrey. The air hums with bees. You keep one eye on the shadows beneath the hedges. The last time you picked nettles with bare hands, you itched for 3 days. Sister Hildegund meets you near the apothecary door with a look of eternal suspicion. She is convinced someone has been skimming dried rose hips. You deny it. She huffs. Trust is hard won here, but so is sugar, and someone's been sneaking it into their porridge. You suspect Sister Agnes. She always looks a little too cheerful at breakfast. In the scriptorium, the senior sisters are copying hagiographies. Lives of saints, lined out in meticulous Latin letter by letter, with barely room to breathe between the sentences. You aren't allowed to copy them yet, but you get to sharpen the quills, cut the parchment, and sweep away the dust. You've memorized half a saint's story just by hearing it muttered aloud while sweeping. A woman who refused to marry. Another who lived in a tree. A third who threw herself into a well rather than surrender to sin. You wonder if the well was cold. Probably. There is a curious tension here between sanctity and survival. You are told to flee the flesh, and yet you must scrub that same flesh, tend its sores, heat its food, wrap it in layers against the wind. You must care for the body like a relic while pretending it doesn't matter. It's enough to make a person question what holiness actually looks like. Perhaps it is not in levitation or visions, but in the quiet courage to endure your own sweat for one more day without complaint. Supper tonight is lentils again. The cook has tried to spice them with wild garlic. The result is pungent. You eat anyway. Food is not for pleasure here. Though there are whispered tales of a sister who once smuggled a cinnamon stick from a traveling merchant and chewed it like a guilty miracle. The abbess visits the dormitory later. She moves slowly, her veil soft with age, her hands spotted like overripe pears. She asks no questions, just looks. Her eyes linger on your stitching, the neatness of your folded blanket, the faint ink mark on your thumb. She nods. Approval. Or maybe just acknowledgement. It's hard to tell in cloister speak. Later during evening prayers, your thoughts drift. Not far, just enough to brush against the idea of spring, of what the orchard might look like in bloom, of the color of your mother's apron, of the sound of a stream near your childhood home. These thoughts are not forbidden, but they are to be held loosely. Too much yearning leads to discontent, and discontent is the gateway to temptation, or so you are told. Tonight you are assigned candle duty. You trim the wicks and melt the stubs together to make new ones. It smells of tallow and soot. Your fingers are slick with wax, and your shoulders ache from stooping. But as the flames flicker to life, you feel something small and warm flicker inside you too. Not pride, exactly. More like a whisper of presence, a reminder that you are still here, still lit. The day ends, as it always does, with compline and the extinguishing of lights and the slow procession to your cot. You lie in the dark, listening to the rustle of blankets, the occasional snore, the distant owl. The walls are close, the roof low, but your mind, despite everything, still stretches wide. You think of the saints, the ones who fled into deserts, who refused food, who bled for truth. And you think with the faintest wry smile that sometimes survival looks like defiance, even when dressed in wool and silence. The morning bells ring before the sun remembers to rise. You wake not because you want to, but because the air has grown sharp again, and your breath floats above your face like a ghost, still deciding whether to stay. The straw in your mattress has shifted, poking at your hip with stubborn insistence. It doesn't matter. Comfort is not the point here. Obedience is. You shuffle into your habit fingers stiff and make your way toward the chapel. Your bare feet kiss the cold stones with each step, the chill waking something ancient in your bones. The scent of damp wood and leftover incense clings to the corridor. At this hour, everything is shadow and hush. In the chapel, you kneel beside Sister Aurelia, who has been whispering prayers since before you were even born. Her back is hunched, her voice thin but steady. When she crosses herself, she does so as if etching a seal on time. You try to match her rhythm, but your thoughts wander just a bit. You wonder if she ever thinks about bread while she prays. You do. Hunger has a way of slipping into even the most sacred places. Lauds ends, and the work begins. You've been assigned to the kitchen today, a place where steam rises like blessings and burns like judgment. The hearth is already lit, its flames crackling in conversation with the pot hanging above. Barley porridge is on the menu. Again. You stir with one hand and swat away a fly with the other. The pot bubbles back at you like a bored monk reciting psalms. Sister Bertrada joins you, her hair escaping from her wimple in rebellious wisps. She is in charge of kitchen herbs and secret opinions. As she throws in a pinch of salt, just enough to avoid ascetic scandal, she mutters, "You can tell a lot about a convent by the taste of its soup." You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. Some of us believe in redemption. Others believe in time. You learn quickly that kitchens and cloisters are not just for cooking. They are laboratories of transformation. Here, women make remedies for headaches, concoct syrups for coughs, and brew ink from boiled walnuts. There's a jar labeled holy salve that smells suspiciously like old mustard. You're told not to question it. The alchemy of the kitchen is one of the few spaces where knowledge passes without permission. Recipes are whispered like secrets. Quantities are measured by instinct. And if you're lucky, someone will slip you a sliver of dried apple when the abbess isn't looking. This morning, you're trusted with preparing lavender water for the infirmary. The petals are faded, but their scent is stubborn. You grind them slowly with a pestle, the stone bowl cool against your palm. The repetition soothes your thoughts. For a moment, you almost forget where you are. Outside, a storm threatens. The sky is low and bruised, and the wind pushes against the convent walls with the weight of old regrets. You remember someone once said that storms cleanse the soul. That seems unlikely. All they seem to do here is blow the shutters loose and send Sister Agnes into fits of prophecy. Speaking of Sister Agnes, she bursts into the kitchen not long after midday, clutching a basket of rain-drenched greens and proclaiming that Saint Scholastica is displeased with the state of the cabbage crop. You nod politely and accept the basket. It smells like earth and damp wool. By evening you are bone-tired, not from any one task, but from the constancy of effort, of always being useful, always being watched. Even your silences must be purposeful. Even your stillness should serve a function. You peel turnips with the weight of centuries in your wrists. It's hard to imagine that this life was once considered a privilege, but that's the strange truth, isn't it? For many women, the cloister was a sanctuary from marriages they did not choose and fates they could not refuse. Here, at least, there is structure. There is learning if you seek it. There is time, even if it is not your own. After supper, the kitchen quiets. You stay behind to scrub the pots. The water is gray with ash, and your hands prune into pale petals. But in this stillness, you hear things. The wind whispering beneath the door. The soft tick of embers dying in the hearth. The breath of the building itself. Later, as you lie in your cot, your body aches in that satisfying way that means you've done more than survive the day you've inhabited it. Fully. Even if no one noticed. Even if no one said your name aloud. You pull your blanket up to your chin and listen to the storm settling outside. The wind sighs like an old woman. The rain taps out a rhythm older than memory. Somewhere, a spoon clinks in a distant cup. You wonder just for a moment if holiness is really about prayers and silence, or if it's found in scrubbed pots and shared salt, in lavender crushed at dawn and soup stirred with care, in the quiet ways you keep going even when no one is looking, especially then. And with that, you drift into a sleep soft as flower and just as earned. The bell for prime rings like a sigh through the stone corridors, and you rise once more, body stiff, dreams barely faded. There's something comforting about the predictability of it, of knowing that no matter how you slept, the day will begin again in the same shape as before. The sun is barely a rumor in the east, but your feet are already moving slippers, scuffing against the cold floor woolen sleeves dragging at your wrists. Today is laundry day. That means hauling buckets of water from the well-scrubbing cloth against stone slabs and hanging lines that stretch like pennants between gnarled wooden poles. No one romanticizes laundry. It is wet, heavy work. But in the cloister, even laundry is wrapped in ritual. You wash habits with the same reverence some give to relics. After all, these garments are your armor. Your veil is your banner. And your underclothes, well, those are private even to God. By the time you reach the wash house, your arms ache from the cold. The water drawn at dawn is bracing, perhaps even theological. You plunge your hands in like someone preparing for communion. The soap is homemade, lumpy, and smells faintly of old lard and mint. Sister Walpurga has already claimed her favorite spot by the fire elbow deep in a basin of stiffened linen. You nod to her and begin your work. It is a rhythm now, soak, scrub, rinse, wring. The stone basin is worn from decades, centuries of the same motions. You are just the next in a long line of women whose devotion has been measured not in miracles, but in calluses. There's a superstition that stains that won't lift from cloth are signs of spiritual impurity. You find that both hilarious and deeply unfair. Today, you're battling what might be berry juice or maybe sacramental wine. It's always the holiest things that leave the worst marks. As the sun finally climbs above the cloister walls, the yard begins to dry. You hang the habits in a crooked row, the fabric snapping in the wind like the flags of a small and stubborn kingdom. For a moment, the laundry looks almost beautiful, like the sails of quiet lives, catching whatever wind the world allows. Sister Notburga joins you with a basket of towels and an expression that suggests she's already composed 4 psalms about how much she hates damp weather. The Lord tests us with mildew, she says. You nod solemnly. And with socks that never dry. She chuckles, and for that moment, you're not just nuns, you're women, elbow to elbow, against the indignity of soggy underthings. There's a strange democracy in laundry. The abbess's veil gets the same treatment as the scullery maid's apron. Cleanliness may not be next to godliness, but it's certainly a shared fate. By mid-morning, your hands are raw, and your back hums with fatigue. You pause for a moment, on the edge of the cloister walk, watching the linen sway. You think about how these tasks, so menial, so easily forgotten, are the very things that knit your days together. That gives shape to the silence. In the refectory, later, you eat with fingers that still smell of soap. The bread is coarse, the broth thin, but it warms your belly in the way that makes the afternoon bearable. Conversation is forbidden during meals, of course, but glances are not. Across the table, Sister Ethelgeetha raises an eyebrow at your reddened knuckles and gives a sympathetic tilt of her head. You respond with a smirk. Your own kind of dialogue. There is a school of thought among certain theologians that argues spiritual labor should not distract from physical labor. Another that claims the opposite. But here in the cloister, you do both, sometimes simultaneously. You mutter the Magnificat while wringing out a towel. You contemplate mortality while picking thorns from the hems of robes. It's in these moments, bent over a pile of wet cloth, that you start to question, is salvation meant to feel like this? Like soggy knees and freezing wrists? Like the sting of lie in your cuts? Or perhaps this is the point, to sanctify the mundane, to make each wash a benediction. By the end of the day, your shoulders are tired and your palms look like maps. But you've done something. Something small and honest. You've made something clean. And maybe, just maybe, you've scrubbed a little bit of yourself clean too. As you prepare for Compline, slipping into a dry, scratchy habit, you feel the ghost of satisfaction. Not pride exactly, but something quieter. A kind of peace that comes not from praise, but from presence. From showing up. From doing what needed doing without complaint and with just a touch of humor. You lie down that night with the scent of lavender water still clinging faintly to your sleeves, and the sound of wind fluttering through the laundry lines still playing behind your eyelids. And though no one will write a chronicle about it, today was not wasted. You lived it. You scrubbed it. You bore it gently. You wake to the sound of bells again, though this time it's the small one, the hesitant one, the one that almost seems embarrassed to ask for your attention. It's lauds, the hour of praise, and while your body aches from the weight of yesterday's buckets and basins, you pull yourself up with a sigh that no saint could ever entirely sanctify. Today is herb duty. You pass through the cloistered garden quiet and still under a hazy dawn. The dew clings to your hem like gossip, and your breath fogs in front of you in soft clouds. This is no idle stroll among flower beds. No, you are headed to the apothecary, your kingdom of tinctures bundles, and things that smell vaguely like regret mixed with rosemary. It is said that women in cloisters preserved more medical knowledge than many of their male counterparts. You don't question it. You live it. Behind this wooden door and beneath these rafters, wisdom hums not loud but steady. The room smells like dried sage beeswax and a little bit of vinegar. A mouse scurries behind the jars. You pretend not to notice. You've reached a détente. It doesn't eat the wormwood, and you don't scream when it appears during vespers. You run your fingers along shelves of dried angelica thyme and comfrey. There's monkshood too, of course, but it's tucked safely in the back behind 3 stern warnings in Latin. The nuns here might be holy, but they're not naive. Your task today is to make a poultice for Sister Ermeltrude, who has once again fallen from the ladder in the orchard. She insists she saw an angel. You suspect the angel was a branch. Either way, her ankle is the size of a duck's egg, and you need to fix it. You select comfrey root for its healing properties, and yarrow to keep infection at bay. There's a certain satisfaction in this kind of alchemy, not quite magic, certainly not miracle, but something close to both. You crush, mix, and bind with gentle fingers, humming a hymn you only half remember. Healing, it turns out, is mostly repetition. And patience. Some say women were barred from true medicine in the Middle Ages. But the truth is, they were often its quiet backbone. You see it in the recipes passed down like lullabies, in the whispered remedies shared between novices, in the jars labeled only with symbols, because words could be dangerous. When you bring the poultice to Ermeltrude, she grins like someone who knows she'll milk this injury for at least another week of chores skipped. You apply the mash with careful hands, and she winces with drama worthy of a cathedral fresco. Do you think she asks through clenched teeth that saints ever had bunions? You consider this. Probably. But they floated more, I imagine. She chuckles, and you secure the bandage with a strip of linen salvaged from an old altar cloth. Nothing is wasted in this place. Not time, not fabric, not pain. Later, in the stillness of the library, you record the recipe and dosage in a small bound book. You don't put your name on it. No one does. But the record stands like a quiet rebellion against forgetting. A fingerprint pressed into parchment. There's something oddly thrilling about the apothecary's dual nature. It is both refuge and risk. Too much of any root, and you've crossed a line from healer to heretic. Knowledge for women is a careful balance. You must know enough to help, but not enough to threaten. You must heal, but never outshine. It is a tightrope, and you've learned to walk it in soft shoes. You remember last year, when a bishop came to inspect the abbey's practices. He sniffed around the herb room like someone suspecting sorcery. You'd smiled sweetly, offered him mint tea for his digestion, and made sure the valerian was hidden beneath a basket of lavender sachets. He left reassured and snoring. There's a running joke among the sisters that the most dangerous thing in the cloister isn't the devil or desire, it's knowing too much about mold. But under the laughter, there's truth. What you do here, preserving, healing, learning, it matters, and it unsettles. By evening, you're rinsing your hands in a basin of rose water, the scent clinging to your sleeves. You pass the same mouse again in the corridor. Still not a word between you. During compline, your knees ache, but your mind stays busy. You catch yourself wondering whether dried feverfew might help Sister Ludmilla's headaches and whether the abbess would notice if you slipped some into her soup. As the candles are snuffed out one by one, you lie back on your straw mattress with the faint scent of rue in your hair and the comfort of a job done quietly, thoroughly, and just beneath the surface of notice. And maybe that's the point. Not every miracle needs trumpets. Some come wrapped in linen and smeared with crushed root. Some whisper instead of shout. Tonight you're back on kitchen duty. The hearth hisses with leftover ash, and the big pot your oldest soot-stained companion waits like a cranky beast. It's pottage again, of course. What else would it be? Some days, you think the entire cloister runs on turnips and lowered expectations. But tonight, the task is a little different. You're preparing for a visiting prior and his entourage, which means the pottage gets a carrot, just one, cut carefully like it's a holy relic. You start peeling the root vegetables in rhythm with the bells echoing faintly outside. It's odd how sound structures your entire day. Lauds, prime, terce, chop the onions at sext, stir at none, burn your fingers just in time for vespers. The kitchen is more than a place for food. It's a theater of discipline and improvisation, and a test of patience, especially when the fire won't catch, and the wind howls through the cracks like a soul in purgatory. You pass Sister Apollonia near the drying herbs, muttering something under her breath that might be Latin or might just be her opinion about cabbage. She's been cooking here longer than the wooden beams have stood. Her fingers are scarred but steady. She once fended off a rat with nothing but a ladle and a psalm, a legend in her own right. Tonight's meal includes lentils, which means you'll be blamed if anyone's digestion turns poetic. Still, the effort is worth it. The abbess wants the cloister to seem orderly, generous, modest, but also impressive enough to discourage intervention. That's the trick, isn't it? You must be humble, but not too poor. Holy, but not unkempt. Fed, but not too full. The line between display and deception is a tightrope walked best in a wimple. While stirring, you glance at the cupboard that holds the special spices, saffron, nutmeg, pepper, all locked away behind 2 keys, and a gaze from Sister Apollonia that could curdle milk. These were smuggled here over decades, offered by noble patrons or bartered through strange channels. You once heard a rumor that a certain powder came from a Venetian widow who insisted it cured melancholy and mice. You haven't tested that one. There's a historical curiosity worth noting here. Women in cloisters often had greater access to ingredients and culinary methods than their secular sisters. Paradoxical, isn't it, imprisoned by vows, yet freer in some aspects of daily life? In fact, if you were a noble girl sent to a convent, Odds were you'd learn more about nutrition and medicinal cooking than you ever would at court. Tonight you whisper a grace as you add the final ingredients. Not because the prior will care, but because the habit of gratitude helps the food settle better in the soul. You ladle pottage into bowls, trying not to think about how yesterday's pottage looks eerily similar to today's. No one complains. That would be ungrateful. Besides, Sister Wilgefortis says, grumbling makes you age faster. And while she may be 90, her teeth are still her own, so you listen. The prior arrives during supper, trailing incense and expectations. You lower your eyes. You are not supposed to listen. You are not supposed to speak unless spoken to. But you catch the word reform anyway, and the way the abbess's lips tighten like a drawstring. Later, as you scrub the pots, clean with ashes and bristle, your hands go raw. You hum to yourself an old melody, maybe secular, maybe not. It's hard to tell anymore. Most things blur in this life. Sacred and mundane. Bitter and sweet. There's a moment just before the fire dies when you sit alone on the kitchen bench, spoon still in hand. You think of all the women who've done this before you, stirred, served, swallowed their doubts with broth. And you wonder gently if history ever bothered to remember them. Or if it only recalls the meals, not the hands that made them. You chuckle softly. If that's true, then you've fed more history than you'll ever read. A beet rolls off the bench and lands on the floor with a resigned thud. You leave it there. It's had a long day too. The bells haven't rung yet, but you're already awake. Not out of zeal, heavens no, but because the cold has a way of finding your bones before the dawn does. You lie still on your straw mattress, listening. There it is again, that little creak in the rafters, like a secret, trying not to be overheard. You pull the wool blanket higher, but it's thin-patched and smells faintly of damp stone and lavender from the last wash. Cozy is a stretch. Endurable is closer. You sit up slowly, careful not to wake the novice beside you. Her name is Isabel, and she still dreams in full sentences. You envy that. By the time you reach the wash basin, your breath is already fogging in the air. You splash your face with water so cold it could convert a heretic. Then you dress quickly, habit scapular veil, layer by layer, until you look like every other shadow in the cloister. Uniformity is safety, but also erasure. There's a debate to be had, if you had anyone to debate it with, about whether sameness is holiness or just a trick to keep women quiet. It's one of those questions that lingers under your tongue, like the taste of bad ale, familiar, unwelcome, and impossible to spit out in public. The morning routine is a litany of silence. You move through the cloister halls with the other sisters, your feet scuffing faintly against cold stone. You don't talk. You don't need to. Everything speaks already, the echo of footfalls, the flicker of a candle being relit, the rustle of habits brushing like reeds in the wind. In the chapel, you kneel. The stone bites into your knees, but you've long since stopped noticing. The prayers come next, Latin murmurs rising like smoke. Some days you feel them. Other days they pass through you like birds through mist. This morning your mind wanders. You think about the woman who used to sit beside you, Sister Hilaria. She knew every chant by heart and hummed them under her breath even in the garden. She left last spring, taken to another house, or perhaps to eternal rest. No one ever tells you clearly. In a place obsessed with order, Departures are often the messiest business. After prayers, you're sent to the scriptorium. Ah, yes. The reward for good behavior, hours hunched over parchment, in a room where silence is enforced not by rules, but by the sheer force of ancient dust and expectations. You're not a scribe, not really. Your Latin is functional, your hand steady, but uninspired. You've been tasked with copying herbal remedies today, recipes passed down from sisters long gone. Pennyroyal rue tansy, plants with uses and meanings. There's a peculiar satisfaction in the work, though. As you dip your quill and shape each letter, you're reminded that ink can outlive bone. That's something, isn't it? Midway through, you're interrupted by Sister Regina, who carries with her the energy of a thunderstorm in a habit. She tells you to come help in the infirmary. You follow without question. One does not argue with Sister Regina unless you enjoy being volunteered for privy scrubbing duty. The infirmary is warm at least, smells like honey vinegar, and something mildly alarming. You help mash dried rose hips into a paste for a poultice. The patient is an old woman from the nearby village brought in by her daughter after a fall. She mutters prayers and curses in equal measure. You like her immediately. This, too, is a kind of service, not grand, not canonized, but real. By the time you return to your cell, your knees ache, your fingers are stained with ink and rose-red pulp, and your stomach reminds you it hasn't been consulted in hours. Supper is thin stew and coarse bread eaten in silence. You chew thoughtfully, imagining a world where meals come with conversation and chairs with cushions. Later, you sit by the window, the stars barely visible through the clouded glass. You wonder how many other women are out there staring into the same night, asking the same questions you're too tired to form. You think about the rules, the prayers, the cloister walls. You think about the silence, how it sometimes soothes, sometimes strangles. And then you smile, because somewhere in all this repetition and restraint, you're still here, still wondering, still watching the stars. You've survived another day. Tonight, the wind is especially bold, pressing its fingers through every crack in the stone walls, curling beneath the wooden door, and nudging at the folds of your veil like a nosy ghost. You're not sure if it's trying to get in or trying to pull something out of you. Either way, it's here to stay moaning through the cloister, like an ancient soul who's read too many psalms and still hasn't found peace. You wrap your cloak tighter as you step out into the cloister walk. It's later than you're supposed to be awake, but someone had to stoke the embers in the kitchen hearth. That someone, of course, is you. Sister Genevieve claimed she had a cough. A spiritual one, apparently, because you haven't heard a single sound from her cell all evening. The courtyard is silvered by moonlight, and you pause for just a moment under the arches. There is a kind of sacred quiet here, the kind no rule book can manufacture. You breathe it in. Cold damp, still threaded with the scent of rosemary from the herb garden you helped prune that morning. Even in winter, the plants clutch at life. As you cross toward the kitchen, a memory surfaces of when you first arrived. You were younger, softer, and your shoes were too clean. You asked questions back then. Too many. Like why the abbess's ring had a garnet instead of a cross, or why the Virgin Mary never looked tired in any of the paintings. Someone told you gently but firmly that curiosity in women was like open flame, beautiful to look at, but dangerous without control. You've never forgotten that. Inside the kitchen, the coals glow faintly. You squat beside them, nudging them with a poker, until they crackle back to life. There's comfort in this simple ritual tending fire. It's older than the cloister, older than any doctrine. A task that has survived the centuries passed from hand to hand, mostly women's hands. You add a log watching as it smolders and catches. You whisper a small prayer, not from the breviary, but one you made up long ago. Just a few words. They're mostly for yourself and for the fire. As you wait for the flames to take your thoughts, drift to Sister Amelina. She once confessed to you that she'd rather spend her days in the kitchen than the chapel, not out of rebellion, but because she believed God heard her better when her hands were sticky with dough. She made honey cakes that tasted like hope. She's gone now, transferred again. Or maybe she asked to leave. Or maybe she asked too many questions. You wonder sometimes what keeps the walls of this cloister standing. Mortar, yes, but also silent secret small acts of survival. Things like firewood tucked away before the frost comes, or a spoonful of honey saved for a sister's sore throat, or the way someone years ago carved a tiny rose into the underside of a chapel pew where no one could see it but God. There's a debate to be had about obedience, not the loud kind that comes from men shouting doctrine, but the quieter, slipperier sort that sneaks in with the daily rhythm. When does structure become suffocation? When does ritual become a cage? You don't have an answer, but the question keeps you company. The fire is strong now. You sit for a moment longer, letting the heat kiss your cheeks. Your hands are raw from scrubbing pots earlier, and the warmth seeps into your knuckles like balm. Somewhere in the cloister, a bell tolls softly. Not one of the main bells. This is a smaller secret bell, rung by the infirmarian to signal the turn of the night watch. You wonder who will rise now to tend to the sick, the dying, the ones who whisper strange things in fevered sleep. You return to your cell, quietly slipping through the dark like a shadow with calluses. Isabel is still asleep, her breath steady. You climb onto your pallet, pulling the rough blanket over your shoulders. As your eyes close, you think not of saints, but of Sister Amelina's honey cakes, of the little rose carved in the wood, of the wind that knows every story the stones have heard, of the fire that still burns. You may be one voice among many, but you are here, and you are listening. You wake before the bell, not because you want to, but because your back has decided it's had enough of the straw mattress and your dreams wandered too close to memories you didn't invite. Outside, a crow caws once sharply, like it's reminding you that this is not a place for comfort, but for endurance. You sit up slowly, your muscles protesting, and swing your legs over the edge of the bed. Cold stone greets your feet like an old adversary. There's no fire in the room, of course. No hearth, no candle, not even a warm breath from the window slit above. You breathe in the damp and brace yourself for another round of prayers, silence, and service. Today, you've been assigned to kitchen duty. Again. You suspect this is Sister Regina's way of reminding you not to correct her Latin during compline, even if she did confuse dominus with dominus and call God a feudal landlord. The kitchen smells like boiled leeks and penitence. The bread is already being kneaded by Sister Colette, who can make a decent loaf in her sleep. She barely glances up when you arrive, but her hands offer you a piece of dough as a silent welcome. It's warm and sticky in your fingers, a reminder that even in asceticism, there are textures that tether you to the world. You set about washing the root vegetables, turnips mostly, some carrots, and what might once have been a parsnip, though it now looks more like a fossil than food. As you scrub, you glance out the small window near the basin. The yard is still wrapped in early morning fog. A figure moves through it, cloaked carrying a pail. Likely Sister Agnes, who tends the goats, with a look of silent judgment that could sour milk. As you peel and chop your thoughts, drift because there's little else to do when the rhythm of your work mirrors the rhythm of your thoughts. You remember the stories about the saints who fasted until they saw visions. Saint Hildegard, who wrote music from dreams. Saint Catherine, who claimed to survive solely on the Eucharist and divine love. You're not sure if that's holiness or just very creative self-denial. You, on the other hand, survive on bread crusts and boiled cabbage. Divine love is not quite filling. After the soup is started and the bread is rising, Sister Beatrice enters with a basket of herbs. You can tell she's been in the garden again. The hem of her habit is damp and smells faintly of mint. She offers you a handful of marjoram and raises an eyebrow, asking if it might lift the flavor. You nearly laugh, but instead, you nod and stir it in like it might help. There's something comforting in this shared language of survival. No one says it outright, but you all understand the quiet art of making do, of stretching what little you have, whether it's food, patience, or warmth. As the stew simmers, you sit by the fire and pull out your sewing. A habit hem needs mending again. You've repaired it so many times, it now contains more stitches than original thread. You wonder idly if that's what your soul feels like. There's a theory that the cloister walls are not just for keeping the world out, but for keeping women in. A scholar, if you had access to any, might argue that this was protection. Another might say it was containment. You don't know which you believe, but either way, you know that walls remember more than they reveal. You once found a small inscription on a pantry beam. Just a name Marta carved with what must have been a spoon or hairpin. No date, no flourish. Just the name hiding in the shadows of the shelves. You whispered it once, just to say it aloud again. As the midday bell tolls, the sisters begin filing in for their meal. Heads bowed, voices hushed. The soup is ladled out, the bread divided. No one complains. But you see the flicker of grim amusement in Sister Colette's eyes when she tastes the stew. Apparently, the marjoram did not perform a miracle. After the meal dishes are washed in near silence, water sloshes and someone drops a spoon. The clang rings out like a tiny rebellion. When you finally return to your cell for a moment's rest, you find the small linen cloth you left on your cot folded neatly. A kindness from someone who won't mention it. That's how it works here. Love is not spoken. It's mended, stirred, tucked in, swept up, or left waiting without being asked. You lie down for a moment and close your eyes. The soup is still heavy in your stomach, but your hands are light, your mind quieter. You've done what needed to be done. Tomorrow, the bread will rise again. You awaken not to bells, but to the sound of rain ticking against the shutters, soft, insistent, like the sky is trying to whisper secrets into the walls. The kind of rain that doesn't shout, but soaks everything quietly, patiently. You don't mind. Rain is gentler than most things here. It excuses slower steps, longer silences, and sometimes If you're lucky, work moved indoors. Today, your task is in the scriptorium, a rare treat. Not everyone is trusted with ink and parchment after all, but you've proven steady-handed and, more importantly, discreet. No one wants their sacred texts smudged or their marginalia mocked. The scriptorium is cold, always cold, no matter the season. The windows are narrow, the walls thick, and the air smells of vellum dust and candle smoke. You settle into your stool and run your fingers across the desk's groove where decades of elbows have left a hollow. The tools are simple quill, inkpot scraper weights, a knife for trimming edges, and a small pumice stone for smoothing flaws. Today's task is not copying scripture, but mixing pigments. You've been assigned to help Sister Adela, who has the sharpest eyes and driest wit in the cloister. She gestures toward the bowl of dried plants and minerals. Blue today, she says, as if requesting rain or forgiveness. You nod. The blue comes from lapis lazuli ground, fine into powder and mixed with egg white and water. It's expensive, sacred, and fiddly. You grind carefully, rhythmically, imagining the stone once lived in a far-off mountain and has now been reborn to illuminate the robes of an apostle. As the powder takes form, Sister Adela hums a tune. You recognize it, an old folk melody likely brought in from outside before she took her vows. The cloister band's secular music, of course. But melodies have a way of sneaking through the cracks like weeds in mortar. There's a strange comfort in this quiet labor. The sound of scraping stirring, and the occasional soft curse when ink splashes too far. Every stroke is a prayer, every blot a reminder that even holy hands slip. The parchment in front of you contains a hymn words of praise penned centuries ago, now brought to light again with your help. You wonder who first wrote these words. A monk, a nun like you. Did they sit hunched over in similar candlelight, muttering Latin and praying their ink would dry evenly? In the margins of the manuscript, someone has doodled a cat chasing a mouse. It's ancient and absurd and makes you grin. Sister Adela notices and chuckles quietly. He was a bored illuminator, she says, or maybe just honest. There's a debate among scholars, or so you've overheard, about whether medieval women in cloisters found intellectual freedom here, or were denied it in more refined chains. You're not sure. You know only that your mind hums when you copy lines. Your fingers come alive with the shape of each letter. And that's something. By midday, your back is sore, your eyes blurry, and your stomach growling. You blink hard and finish one more line before setting the quill down. Sister Adela gives your work a glance and a quiet, "Not bad," which is high praise from her. You feel strangely proud. Lunch is simple lentils and yesterday's bread. But you eat with the quiet satisfaction of someone who's made beauty, however small, from dust and pigment. After the meal, you return not to the scriptorium, but to your cell. The rain is still falling, and someone's patched the drip near your corner with a bit of waxed cloth. Another kindness, unsigned. You sit for a while listening. The cloister is full of silences, but not all of them are empty. Some hold care, some hold memory. Some are simply waiting. You pull out a scrap of parchment tucked under your mattress. Not official, not sanctioned, just yours. You've been copying a poem in secret, a line here, a word there memorized and rebuilt like a lost song. It's not heretical, just forgotten. You add another line now carefully in your smallest script, as if each letter might disappear if anyone else looks too closely. You think of the woman who wrote it long ago. Maybe she sat like this, hiding her words in corners, letting them breathe between the walls. Maybe she too dreamed of blue pigment and rain and hands that could write what couldn't be spoken. The rain eases finally. A shaft of gray light spills in from the window, catching the edge of the page. For a moment, it looks like the ink is glowing. You smile faintly, then tuck it back beneath the straw. The bell rings for vespers. You rise, spine cracking gently, and make your way to chapel. Today, you've touched something holy, not in the chants or the rituals, but in the swirl of blue, the shape of letters, the quiet preservation of thought. And tonight, that's enough. The chapel is dim lit only by the wavering flames of beeswax candles and the lingering blue of twilight pressing against stained glass. You sit in the second row from the front, always the second row. Not because of devotion, but because Sister Clarice sings too loudly in the first. Her voice is enthusiastic and a little off-key. But then no one ever accused cloister life of being harmonious in all things. Tonight's prayers stretch long, maybe longer than usual, or maybe your body simply feels it more. The joints in your knees whisper complaints as you kneel. Your stomach grumbles its own psalm unanswered. But still, you bow your head and hum the ancient Latin under your breath. Words older than your grandmother's grandmother. Words you barely understand, and yet they hold you. After prayers, you retreat to the infirmary. Not because you're ill, but because Sister Agnes asked for help, and you foolishly or kindly agreed. She runs the cloister's little apothecary, and tonight there are roots to be chopped, poultices to be packed in more dried lavender than you know what to do with. The smell is overwhelming. Like walking into a grandmother's wardrobe stuffed with herbs and hope. Sister Agnes is short brisk and smells perpetually of vinegar and camphor. Her hands are stained from handling plants and inks, and her knowledge of healing is impressive, if sometimes alarming. If it's still bleeding, she says cheerfully, handing you a bowl of crushed moss and garlic. You've not packed it tight enough. You don't ask how she knows. She sets you to work, grinding dried comfrey and mint leaves into a paste, muttering about Sister Juliana's sore foot and the suspicious state of Mother Abbess's teeth. You listen, nod, and try not to sneeze as powdered root wafts into the air. There's a rhythm to this kind of care, a quiet, messy intimacy. Everything here smells of damp linen vinegar and old secrets. The shelves are filled with jars labeled in looping Latin, some cracked, some smudged. You spot one labeled Draconis Oas, dragon's bone. It's actually fossilized something or other, but the name sticks, and that's half the charm. You stir the paste. It resists. Like most things here, outside, the rain has returned. You hear it now, only in pieces, as if it's choosing certain windows to visit. You wonder what illness the sound of rain might cure. Sorrow, restlessness, or perhaps it's just a lullaby in liquid form. You glance at Sister Agnes, hunched over a worn notebook. She's recording something, measurements maybe, or a recipe. Her handwriting looks like spider legs. You ask her gently why she never became a physician. She snorts. Because I was born with breasts and the wrong name. Why else? You laugh quietly, not because it's funny, but because the alternative might sting too much. There's an old story among the sisters about a woman who disguised herself as a man and studied medicine in Bologna. You've heard it in whispers, in riddles never quite confirmed. Some say she was caught and thrown into prison. Others say she lived out her days healing popes and peasants alike. You'd like to believe the second version. Your hands finish their task finally. The paste is smooth, the bowl scraped clean. Sister Agnes inspects it with a nod. Good enough to slap on a bishop, she mutters. You suppress a grin. She hands you a cloth bundle. This one's for Sister Magdala. She won't come down here, so you'll need to go up. Sister Magdala lives in the north wing. She's not bedridden exactly, but she hasn't joined the others for weeks. Some say she's ill. Others say she's mourning. One rumor suggests she's translating ancient texts in secret. You don't ask. You climb the stone stairs cloth and hand candle flickering beside you. The corridor is narrow, with arches like folded wings overhead. Your footsteps echo too loud. You reach her door and knock once softly. A pause. Then enter. She sits near the window, pale-faced, but alert, wrapped in a shawl too fine for this place. A candle burns low beside her, illuminating not scripture, but a piece of paper, filled with Greek characters. You pretend not to notice. You hand her the poultice. She takes it, sets it aside. Then her gaze meets yours. Do you ever feel, she asks suddenly, that silence is just another kind of resistance? You don't know how to answer that. So you shrug. She smiles not kindly exactly, but knowingly. Some of us keep quiet because we must. Others because we choose when to speak. You nod more to yourself than her. Downstairs, the bell tolls for the night watch. You excuse yourself, offering a soft good night, and descend once more into the darkness. The cloister is quieter now. Most have gone to their cells. A few stray candles flicker, like thoughts not quite put to bed. You return to your own small room, place your damp shoes by the door, and sit. Outside, the rain slows. You think of poultices, powdered roots, and women who learn to heal without permission. You think of silence, soft, powerful, and how sometimes the smallest acts of care are the loudest resistance. You blow out your candle, and sleep when it comes smells faintly of mint and something older than memory. The bell that wakes you isn't the morning one, it's earlier, much earlier. It clangs in the dark like a spoon on the side of an iron pot, impatient and sharp. You know that sound. Someone has died. You sit up slowly, heart thudding a little louder than the bell itself, and wrap your cloak around your shoulders. The air is damp heavy with dew, and the floor is cold against your feet. Outside, your cell footsteps move in whispers. You follow them, joining the quiet procession down the corridor. Death in the cloister isn't dramatic. There's no screaming, no gasping, last words. Only a sister lying still, her hands folded over her chest, in a room filled with candlelight and breath held too long. Sister Terentia. You hadn't known her well, no one really had. She'd come from another house years ago and kept to herself. But now she belongs to all of you again, in the way the dead always do. You help prepare her body, because every sister must help eventually. There is no hierarchy in death. You wash her face, her arms comb what's left of her hair, and wrap her in linen that smells of rosemary and cold stone. The cloth binds gently, as if it too knows not to speak too loudly. A few of the older sisters begin the vigil prayers. You murmur along. The words are less for her and more for yourselves, a ritual to wrap the living in order to make peace with what can't be stopped. Somewhere between the amens and the shuffling of stiff knees, You glance at the small book tucked beneath her pillow. It's not scripture, it's poetry. Latin, yes, but not the kind the church approves. You catch a line about stars and longing and something that sounds suspiciously like joy. You wonder if anyone else notices. If they do, they say nothing. When the vigil ends, you return to your bed, but sleep has vanished, unwilling to share space with death. So you sit in the dark thinking about how Sister Terentia used to walk in the garden when no one else did. How she hummed under her breath when she thought no one heard. How she always used extra honey in her oatcakes, and you think about how little you knew her. The sun rises late, as if it too had been up all night. You go about your chores with the kind of quiet that wraps around your bones. No one speaks more than they must. Even the hens seem subdued. You drop feed into their coop and mutter apologies for startling them. Later in the scriptorium, Sister Ameltrude talks about death without ever saying the word. She had a beautiful hand, she says, referring to Terentia's calligraphy. Even when her mind wandered, her lines did not. You nod. You never saw her write, but now you wish you had. There's a debate among some of the younger novices about what happens after a nun dies. One insists the soul lingers for 3 days near the cloister before it finds peace. Another says the soul departs immediately grateful for the release. A third, less pious, more curious, asks, and what if she wasn't ready to go? The room falls silent at that. Even the quills seem to hesitate. Death has always held a strange place in cloistered life. You live as if you've already died to the world, and yet, when death comes, it still surprises you. Like a guest who enters without knocking, who finds you unprepared in your nightgown and slipper socks. After supper, there's a discussion about who will inherit Sister Terentia's cell. It's practical, not morbid. Space is precious. You don't want it too cold, too far from the kitchen, too full of someone else's ghost. But Sister Ottilia volunteers. She says the view of the garden will be good for her soul. You suspect she just wants the quiet. That night, you sit with Sister Agnes again in the infirmary. She's mixing a balm for stiff joints and talking about how the body breaks down like a badly copied manuscript errors creeping in with time. You can patch it, she says, but eventually the parchment crumbles. You ask if she fears dying here. She shakes her head. No, I fear not being remembered. There it is, the thing no one says aloud, wrapped in lavender and beeswax. You wonder how many women have passed through these cloisters, their names buried beneath moss-covered stones, their lives reduced to dates and initials. And yet they loved, laughed, grieved, wrote poetry under their pillows, shared secrets over oatcakes, tended gardens like they were altars. You think of Terentia again. You remember the shape of her hands, the way she nodded at you once in the garden when neither of you had anything to say, but still wanted to be seen. And you promise not aloud, but deep down to remember her. That night, before sleep claims you, you whisper her name once, just to be sure it doesn't disappear. The bells are late today. Not by much, but enough to make your bones worry. In a place ruled by rhythm, the swing of the censer, the rise and fall of the chant, the crack of the bread crust, at precisely the 6th hour, lateness rings louder than sound. You're already half dressed when the bell finally tolls, and you sigh with relief that it wasn't your turn to pull the rope. No one wants to be remembered as the sister who let time slip. At breakfast, the mood is soggy. Rain has crept in through the roof beams again, and the porridge has accepted its fate. You chew dutifully and tell yourself it's like soup, just without ambition. Across from you, Sister Amalberga is counting the number of raisins in her bowl with holy suspicion. She always believes someone else gets more. Maybe she's right. Maybe that's her penance. Later, you're assigned to laundry because, of course, it's raining. The cloister's logic remains undefeated. You haul the wet linen to the yard, where gray sheets of drizzle turn everything into a baptism you didn't ask for. Still you scrub. The soap is made from ashes and animal fat, and your hands are cracked before you've even begun the second shift of habits. There is no miracle strong enough to keep wool white in this weather. By midday, your arms ache, and the pile of soaking veils seems no smaller. Sister Judoc joins you with a basket and a story about the abbess of her youth, who made novices scrub the stairs with vinegar for discipline and spiritual humility. If your knees don't pray, your hands must, she says. You're not sure if that's scripture or just something nuns say when the soap runs out. And yet in the rhythm of wash and rinse, a strange peace settles. The fabric becomes familiar, almost intimate. Each fold remembers a shoulder, a brow, a sigh. These are not just clothes. They're the hours stitched into a woman's life. They carry sweat and sleep and sanctity. You scrub a hem and wonder if Sister Alvara cried while wearing it. You wring out a scapular and think of the girl who fainted during Lent and blamed it on visions. The cloister doesn't waste. Not fabric, not food, not even water. The rinse basin is used again and again until it resembles thin broth more than cleanliness. But you press on because the alternative is worse: to do nothing, to sit still and feel the silence breathe down your neck. In the afternoon, you get a rare task delivering linen to the outer guest house. This means stepping briefly beyond the cloister gate. The porter nods and hands you the keys with a gravity usually reserved for relics. You walk alone, and the world outside smells wrong, like movement, like choices, like mud that isn't yours. The guest house is empty, save for a traveling scholar, too poor for the inn, and too proud to admit he can't read the Psalms properly. You set down the linen, keep your eyes lowered, and retreat. But later, the abbess will ask what you saw, and how he looked, and whether his boots were clean. You will answer in careful half-truths, because you know what happened to the last novice who lingered too long near foreign books. There's a long-held rule. In cloister life, curiosity is only holy if it's silent. You return just as the rain shifts from drizzle to downpour, and now even the cloister cats look offended. Sister Luitgard is chasing one of them from the chapel stairs, muttering about fur in the holy water. You catch yourself smiling, and that feels almost rebellious. Evening brings compline, and another chance to sing your breath into the rafters. The chants are low and steady like the pulse of the building itself. Tonight, there's a new verse added for Sister Terentia. Her name floats between the stone arches woven into sound. It won't stay there long, but for now, it's enough. Back in your cell, your habit still smells of wet wool and vinegar. You lie down and press your face into the coarse sheet, which carries a faint scent of rosemary. Someone remembered. Someone added that. Maybe Sister Agnes. Maybe you'll do the same for someone else someday. And maybe that's what survival looks like here. Not grand acts or golden moments, but this slow stitching of care into the mundane. A drop of balm in a cracked hand. A remembered name in a whispered prayer, a clean veil delivered without being asked. You close your eyes and think about all the hands that washed linen before yours, hands that trembled, hands that bled, hands that quietly mended what no one noticed was torn. And you wonder, not for the first time, if holiness might simply be the act of showing up again and again, soaked to the bone, and still folding the towel straight. The candle by your bedside sputters before it settles into a steady flame, and in that flicker, you see her again. Mother Gudul, long gone, but still muttering in your memory about starching collars like a path to salvation. You smile, though the habit chafes at your neck tonight. Everything chafes when the air is damp and your patience is thinner than the soup you had for supper. Today, you've been assigned to help with the infirmary. Not because you know herbs, though you've memorized enough of Hildegard's cures to fake confidence, but because Sister Madrana sprained her wrist slipping on the cloister steps, and no one else dares question the abbess's rotations. So here you are, holding a pot of warm elderflower tea, surrounded by coughs, complaints, and quiet suffering. The infirmary is a world of its own. Tucked behind the chapel, it smells of honeyed poultices, boiled nettles, and resignation. Some sisters rest quietly feverish and pale, while others grumble with enough force to make you wonder if recovery is even in their plans. One novice claims she has visions again. You offer her mint water and resist the urge to roll your eyes. Visions tend to multiply during Lent. You kneel beside the eldest patient, Sister Bertrada, who hasn't spoken in days. Her eyes are open but cloudy like storm glass. You whisper the Psalms to her, not because she needs them, but because you do. The sound of your own voice, soft and steady, reminds you that the world still moves in rhythm. That breath follows breath. That life insists on continuing even when the bones say otherwise. In a quiet moment, Sister Hiltrude takes you aside and places a jar of salve into your hands. For joints and silence, she says, cryptically as always. You nod solemnly and tuck it away. No one ever gives instructions here. They give hints, relics, riddles. And you are expected to decipher the sacred from the strange. The truth is, women in cloisters were often better healers than the men who wore plague masks and bled patients dry. It's one of those quiet facts that history rarely sings about. But here in this low-ceilinged room, with its patchwork curtains and eternal drafts, remedies are brewed from kitchen scraps and memory. Wormwood for digestion, fennel for breath, juniper for the soul, and sometimes healing has nothing to do with herbs. Sometimes it's the way you sit with someone and hold their hand without asking questions. Sometimes it's the simple act of staying, of being the still point in someone else's storm. Later, you're tasked with preparing linen strips for bandages. You tear cloth and silence the rip of fabric like a soft thunder. Each piece is a future touch, an offering to the body wrapped in care. You stack them neatly the way you were taught. Order matters here, even if nothing else makes sense. Outside, the bell rings for sext. You whisper an apology to Sister Bertrada and leave her dozing. On your way out, you pass Sister Wiberata reading aloud from a book of medical charms. She's not supposed to reading, for pleasure is frowned upon, but she claims it's for the patients. You suspect it's also for herself. At midday, a boy arrives at the outer gate with a letter. Not for you, of course. Nuns don't receive personal mail unless someone has died or become a bishop. But the sight of him a face not veiled, a voice not muted, unsettles something in your chest. He looks at you curious, and you look away. You're not supposed to remember the outside, but memory is not so obedient. Back in the cloister garden, you're sent to harvest sage, which according to Sister Hiltrude cures the body and hushes the mind. The leaves are soft between your fingers, like velvet that's been through too many winters. You gather them gently. This is sacred work, though no one will say so. And perhaps that's the strangest truth of all, that within these walls, holiness is in the mundane. In bitter brews and folded linens, in whispering comfort beside a sickbed, in lighting a candle even when the night is long. You do these things not for glory, but because they must be done. By evening, Sister Bertrada has slipped into deeper sleep. The other sisters say she is being called, which is cloister code for dying slowly and politely. You leave another sprig of sage by her bed, though she can no longer smell it. It's the gesture that matters. In a place where words are few and freedom is none, gestures become everything. As you lie down, you think of your own mother, who once pressed warm cloth to your forehead when you were feverish, who whispered songs you barely remember. That same tenderness lives in your hands, now passed down like secret scripture. You curl your fingers and feel it their memory muscle mercy. The wind rustles the thatch above you. Somewhere in the chapel, a candle guttered and went out. You breathe in the faint scent of sage still clinging to your skin, and in the hush between Compline and sleep, you wonder, not for the first time, if sainthood was less about visions and more about who remembered to refill the tea. It begins before dawn, as so many days do here. The bell tolls softly, a sound more felt than heard, and your body rises before your thoughts do. Habit is a stubborn thing, and in the cloister, it clings tighter than your woolen veil. You stretch beneath your coarse blanket fingers, stiff from the night's chill, then slide quietly from your cot. The flagstones bite your soles. You don't flinch anymore. Today, you've been assigned to the scriptorium, a place of ink silence and relentless detail. The moment you step into the narrow, sunless room, the scent hits you first, a strange marriage of old vellum soot and the faint tang of iron gall ink. Your breath fogs slightly in the still air. Candles gutter weakly against the damp walls. You glance at the wooden desk assigned to you, scarred, splattered patient, and the quill laid out atop it like a sacred relic. You do not feel holy. You feel like sneezing. Sister Katerina is already working. Her script is so fine, it could be mistaken for printed type if printing had been invented yet, which it hasn't. She glances at you, nods, then returns to the page. She's transcribing a sermon by Bernard of Clairvaux. Again, there's nothing quite like copying fiery chastity rhetoric while your stomach complains about missing breakfast. Your task is simpler, illuminating initials. You dip your brush into a pot of red lead, steady your hand, and begin. One stroke, then another. Each letter a prayer in disguise. The scriptorium is more than a workspace. It's a philosophy, a theology of patience. Every blot is a confession, every flourish an act of devotion. And yet no one tells you how long to sit. You simply know. Hours pass by in complete silence, broken only by the scratch of quills and the occasional cough. There's something oddly rebellious about women being here at all. In some orders, nuns weren't even taught to write, let alone decorate sacred texts. And yet, here you are, painting golden vines around the words of dead men. Occasionally, you sneak in a joke, a tiny snail peeking from a margin, a nun chasing a fox, a cat with a bishop's hat. Will anyone notice? Probably not. But the rebellion is there, glinting in tempera and mischief. One of the sisters whispers that in some abbeys, the women hid their names in the illuminated borders, tiny initials inside leaves, or the fold of a monk's robe. A secret form of authorship, one that history tried to forget. You think about doing the same. By midday, your eyes blur. You blink hard and stretch your neck, cracking it softly. Someone brings in weak beer and hard cheese. You chew slowly, staring out the slit window. It's raining again. Of course it is. You've begun to suspect that the sky has taken a vow of wetness. When you return to your page, the paint has thickened. You add a drop of egg white to revive the sheen. Your fingers are stained red and blue, like bruises in reverse. And then comes the moment of repair. Sister Scholastica, our de facto librarian, brings in a battered book from the 10th century. It's come loose at the spine, and she needs someone gentle. That's you, apparently. You unbind it carefully, fingers reverent, almost breathless. You imagine the nun who wrote it a century or 5 ago, hunched like you with cramped fingers and eyes strained by poor light. You whisper a quiet hello, just in case she's listening. Repairing manuscripts feels more like conversation than correction. You smooth the pages, mend the parchment tears with a fine needle and linen thread. You stitch silence into words. You patch holes left by time mice and human error. Every wrinkle is respected. Nothing is erased, only softened. As you sew, you wonder if anyone will ever mend your story like this, or if you too will become part of a book no one quite remembers writing. Later, as the day slips toward vespers, Sister Katerina sets down her quill with a satisfied sigh. Her page is beautiful, the calligraphy sharp, the margins aligned. She shows you, and you both nod in mutual respect. No praise is given aloud. None is needed. Before you leave the scriptorium, you wash your hands in cold water, scrubbing the ink from your knuckles. It never fully comes off. It lingers like a blessing or a stain. As you walk back through the cloister, you pass the chapter house, where abbesses of centuries past are buried beneath the floor. You always step a little lighter there, not out of superstition, but solidarity. In your cell that night, you inspect your own copybook. Nothing special. Just a few lines of copied psalms and a margin creature or two. But it's yours. And in a world that erases women quietly and thoroughly, even a single inked page feels like defiance. You light your candle. The flame trembles. You pull your blanket up to your chin and breathe in the smell of parchment and soot still clinging to your sleeves. There's a strange comfort in knowing that tomorrow and the day after, you'll return to the scriptorium again, to shape letters, to make beauty, to leave behind a mark no one expected from someone like you. Maybe that's the point. Maybe survival isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just about making one more page. The wind hasn't let up. It sighs and moans through the thatch above your head, slipping between the beams like a gossiping ghost. It's not that you're afraid, well, maybe just a little, but more that every creak in the roof makes you do a mental inventory of what might collapse first: the chimney, the rafters, or your patience. Outside, the frost has grown bolder. It now glazes everything with a silvery crust, even the straw left out for the goats. One of them glares at you this morning, as if to say, "I didn't sign up for this." Neither did you truly. You break the ice in the water bucket with the blunt end of a ladle. That's your drink sorted. Medieval hydration, brought to you by elbow grease and slightly questionable well water. Breakfast is barley porridge again. You try to pretend it's exotic and exciting. Maybe today it's Icelandic fusion. You sprinkle it with a bit of salt because spices are the fantasy of nobles, and your most daring culinary move is stirring clockwise instead of widdershins. But here's something curious about this frozen world. It doesn't stop moving just because your joints beg for mercy. The animals still need tending. The fires still need feeding. And the cloister, this odd little island of women, still breathes through it all. You step outside, skirts hitched, clogs slippery, and take the long walk to the woodpile. The truth is, the firewood situation is always a bit tense. No one wants to be the one who uses the last decent log. You eye the pile. Some pieces are too green, others damp from last night's snowmelt. You choose the least soggy and haul them back in a sack that feels heavier every year. You don't complain. Complaints are for people who think someone might listen. Inside, the fire is still smoldering. You blow on it gently. It resists. You blow harder. It surrenders. Sparks leap up like startled thoughts, and soon the orange glow spreads. Heat, real heat, begins to crawl through your bones. You rub your hands together, then your forearms, then press your palms to your face like a prayer. Today's chore list is pinned near the refectory door with an old nail and someone's broken patience. You're on latrine duty. Again, let's talk about medieval plumbing, shall we? Or rather, its enthusiastic absence. The latrine is not a private affair. It's a shared trench with high walls, low dignity, and the occasional rat who seems just a little too comfortable with your presence. Your job is to scrub the bench throw in a bucket of lime and whisper a prayer that cholera is feeling lazy today. You bring your cleaning tools, mainly water, vinegar, and a sense of spiritual detachment, and get to work. The cold bites and your breath fogs, but you keep at it. Scrubbing is meditation. In this world, every unpleasant task is a spiritual metaphor. You are not just cleaning waste, you are purifying the body and soul. Or so they say. Mostly, you're just trying not to gag. Halfway through, Sister Amaltrudis passes by. She pauses, then says solemnly, "Blessed are those who cleanse what others leave behind." You can't tell if she's quoting scripture or inventing it. Either way, you nod. It sounds holy enough. Back in the cloister's warm belly, you peel off your damp outer layer and let your fingers thaw near the hearth. The kitchen smells faintly of onions and effort. Sister Fridawine is making something that looks like soup and sounds like regret. You sit beside her and help slice turnips. Her knife is sharper than her tongue, which isn't saying much. You chop in silence until she says, "Did you hear the roof over the novice dormitory nearly blew off?" You raise your brows. That's tonight's entertainment sorted then. Later in the afternoon, you help mend cloaks. The fabric is thick and stubborn, like most of the women here. You thread your needle and stitch by candlelight. The seam is crooked. You sigh and try again. The convent is full of patched things, blankets, books, hearts. Nothing is new. Everything is kept going by stubbornness and string, and maybe that's the miracle. Not that these women live in comfort or certainty, but that they live it all, through cold and hunger, through endless labor and unending rules. They carry on. They joke when they can. They pray when they must. They survive not by grand gestures, but by 1,000 quiet choices to get up to work, to help, to forgive. Evening comes with the scent of burnt onions and wet wool. You eat in silence, grateful for the warmth. Then compline. Then your narrow bed. The straw pokes your back like the finger of a mischievous child, but you are too tired to care. As you blow out the candle, you listen to the wind again. It is no quieter, but neither are you. Morning begins not with sunlight, but with bells. Low, echoing insistent bells that tug at your soul the way hunger tugs at your belly. The kind of sound you feel more than hear. You rise in the cold dark, rubbing warmth into your arms, as if your own skin could remember summer. The stone beneath your feet is damp, and your breath curls like a ghost when you exhale. You don't speak. No one does. Not yet. Matins is waiting, a service for the bleary and the brave. You file into the chapel with the others shuffling through the same aisle where generations have whispered the same psalms. The light is faint, just a few candles licking at the shadows. You don't sing so much as murmur. The words aren't your own. They never were. But your voice joins theirs, and for a moment it feels like belonging. After prayers, you sneak an extra minute in the cloister garden. It's rhymed with frost, every blade of grass glittering like a relic. There's a statue of the Virgin near the well, her face worn smooth by time and weather. Someone's draped her in a scrap of wool, a tiny gesture of affection or superstition or both. You nod to her on your way past, unsure if she sees, but offering respect just in case. You return to the scriptorium, where Sister Bertrade is already hunched over a parchment. The room smells of ink wax and mild disappointment. Today, you're tasked with copying. It's one of the quieter forms of service here, and one of the most enduring. Monasteries preserved more than souls. They preserved texts, records, even half-finished poems. Your hand isn't steady, but it's improving. And besides, perfection isn't required. Endurance is. The page before you is a mixture of Latin and scratches that could be shorthand or a very determined mouse. You dip your quill press gently to vellum and begin, line by line, thought by borrowed thought. Somewhere in the margins, you doodle a snail wearing a crown. Bertrade does not approve, but she also does not scold. You suspect she once drew stranger things in her own early years. Let's pause here to ask, is copying holy because of the words or because of the attention it demands? You must sit still. You must focus. You must humble yourself before the work. There's something monastic about that even outside religion. It's about disappearing your voice, your desires, so that something older and larger might pass through your hands. Later, you help bind a few pages into a folio. Glue made from hooves. Thread made from guts. Nothing romantic, just practical. Sister Ethelgard hands you a bundle of pages and mutters, "Don't breathe too much, it warps the vellum." You nod solemnly and hold your breath mostly to see if she notices. She does. She snorts and hands you a fig. It's her way of saying you're not hopeless. Afterward, you're sent to the herb shed to fetch dried marjoram, not for food for poultices. The winter cold has inflamed Sister Ludwine's joints, and the mixture helps ease the ache. The shed is musty dark and cluttered with bundles of shriveled plants that all smell like stubbornness. You sort through rosemary tansy and dried fennel until you find what you need. The quiet in there is thick, and you let it wrap around you like a blanket. In this stillness, it's easy to imagine the cloister as a kind of spell. time slows. The world narrows. Your life becomes one of details: the weight of herbs, the slope of a letter, the scrape of wood beneath your palm. There is freedom in this smallness, even if it's not the kind you once dreamed of. You return, crush the marjoram, and help Sister Winifred mix the poultice. Her fingers are swollen, and she grimaces with every motion, but she never complains. You offer to help apply it. She eyes you skeptically, then sighs, "Don't mash me like bread dough." You don't. You are gentle. She doesn't say thank you, but she pats your arm, which is enough. Before evening, a novice confides in you. She thinks she isn't cut out for this life. She misses color, music, noise. You nod. You understand. Then you show her the snail in your manuscript. She giggles. It isn't much, but it's enough to make her stay another day. The fire burns low that night. You sit by it, turning your hands in its warmth. Across from you, Sister Bertia is spinning thread. Her fingers move rhythmically, and her lips move two silent prayers or half-remembered songs. You don't interrupt. You just watch. It feels like watching the world turn slowly without you. By the time you reach your bed, your eyes are heavy. The candle flickers once, twice, then gives up. The dark settles in like a patient friend, and you sleep. It starts with a sound. Not a bell this time, but a scuffle, a rustle, a muffled thump behind the chapel wall just before dawn. You freeze mid-step, 1 foot still on the worn cloister stone, and for a moment, all the weight of the monastery presses in with the fog. It's probably a badger, or a cat, or something else entirely. But in a place like this, even small sounds carry stories. The truth is, secrets seep into stone, and monastic walls are saturated with them. You edge closer to the source of the sound, not because you're nosy, you tell yourself, but because someone has to make sure the storeroom hasn't been invaded by rodents or a particularly bold fox again. You find nothing, only shadow's dust and the lingering scent of beeswax. Still, the hairs on your arms don't settle until well after prime. That day, the abbess is in a temper. No one knows why. Maybe she dreamed badly. Maybe someone watered the ale again. Or maybe she too heard something stirring that should have stayed still. You keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your hands very busy. Today's task is weaving. Baskets, to be precise. Not for trade, but for carrying offerings, herbs, and laundry, 3 of the most sacred things in cloister life, if you think about it. Your fingers ache as you work the reeds, coaxing them into loops and twists, trying to ignore the splinters. Sister Seberg supervises sharp-eyed and muttering corrections under her breath. She calls your technique enthusiastic. It is not a compliment. There's a lull after sext. You sit in the courtyard, under the cold sky. Your basket beside you, half finished and slightly lopsided. A pigeon lands near your foot. It looks at you with that particular bird disdain, as if your spiritual progress is somehow disappointing to its feathery standards. You tell it quietly that you've done your best today. It flutters off in what you choose to interpret as approval. Let's pause for a moment here and ask something uncomfortable. Can a cloister meant for sanctuary also become a prison if it begins to define every corner of your mind? You think about that sometimes. Not with bitterness, not with drama, just curiosity. Is safety always the opposite of freedom? Or do they sometimes come disguised as each other? That evening, a traveler arrives. A woman, older than most who pass this way. She's not seeking shelter, just a word with the abbess. You glimpse her from the kitchen door, her cloak thick with dust, her boots scuffed, her expression unreadable. She carries herself like someone who has survived something no one put into scripture. The abbess meets her in the garden. You don't eavesdrop. Not really. But the garden wall is low, and your hearing is excellent. They speak in Latin, which is inconvenient since your Latin is functional only in the context of psalms, not conversations about politics or apparently papal letters. Still, you catch one word, exclaustration, the formal leaving of a cloister. A rare thing, a painful thing, a possibility. That night, you dream of open gates and of the wind, loud and free and slightly terrifying. When you wake, the dream clings to your skin like mist. You go to the storeroom to fetch linen and find Sister Avelina there, already weeping softly into a stack of folded tunics. You sit beside her and say nothing. Eventually, she leans on your shoulder and mutters, "It's just..." I forgot what my mother's voice sounded like. And you, who can't remember your own father's face, clearly nod. It's the kind of forgetting that sneaks up on you slow and quiet like ivy. Later that morning, the traveler leaves. She does not look back. You help prepare ink in the afternoon. Gall, nuts, iron salts, a little wine, and endless patience. The result is dark and unforgiving, like most truths in cloister life. The smell of it stays on your fingers even after Vespers. You half joke to Sister Ermelinda that if the ink gets into your blood, your thoughts might start appearing on the walls. She replies, without blinking, only if your soul is careless. It's hard to tell if she's joking. That's part of her charm. Evening brings a rare indulgence, honeyed oatcakes. A visiting prior left them behind, along with a confusing sermon and an undercooked homily. The cakes, thankfully, are easier to digest. You eat slowly, savoring the sweetness, wondering how something so simple can taste like festival. You pass by the library on your way to Compline and spot a candle still burning inside. Someone forgot, or someone stayed late. You hesitate at the threshold. Then gently, you blow it out. The darkness that follows is complete and oddly soothing. You return to your cell. The night is cold again, but the blanket is thick and smells faintly of rosemary and thyme. You lie down, stare at the wooden ceiling, and try to remember how long you've been here. The days blur. The rhythm never stops. But you are still breathing, still waking, still wondering, and maybe that's what it means to endure. The frost hasn't lifted even by the third bell. It clings to the window panes like lace made by ghosts, and your breath fogs the glass in small puffs as you lean close. It's one of those mornings where even the fire seems to sulk, refusing to catch no matter how earnestly you coax it with kindling and whispered threats. You wrap your shawl tighter and resign yourself to cold fingers until at least prime. Today, you're assigned to the infirmary, not because you're particularly gifted in healing, but because you haven't complained about the smell of elderflower and vinegar. That's all it takes sometimes. Silent tolerance gets you further here than skill ever does. You spend the morning crushing herbs with a stone pestle, the rhythm slow and steady. Lavender, sage, and dried comfrey root, all measured out by Sister Isentrude, whose voice is so soft you sometimes wonder if she speaks from a different plane of existence. The infirmary is quiet today. No one is dying, or recovering from the flu, or bleeding inconveniently on the linens. So you take time to organize jars, hundreds of them, each labeled in a handwriting that looks suspiciously like a spider's final confession. You find one marked simply teeth. You don't ask. Midday brings a request from the cellarer, more ointment for chilblains. The nun's feet have started cracking in the cold. You nod solemnly and pretend to know what you're doing. Honestly, it's more mashed goose fat and hope than science. Still, it's soothing in its way. A quiet alchemy. You stir the pot slowly as if time itself might soften under your hand. Outside, you hear a commotion, laughter sharp and sudden. A novice has slipped on the ice. Again, you peer out the small leaded window and see her sprawled like a discarded puppet, arms outpried, wounded more than limbs. No one helps her up for a moment. They're too busy laughing. Eventually, someone tosses her a broom handle for support. She takes it with a huff and limps off, muttering about the dignity of vows. You smile, but there's a knot in your chest. Because it's easy to forget from the outside how often cloisters are filled with petty humiliations and small resistances. There is laughter, yes, but it's often edged with something else. At Sext, the reading is from Ecclesiastes. Something about time and toil and dust. You're not fully listening. Your mind wanders to the jar of teeth again. Where did they come from? Who decided to keep them? And more unsettling, why? You don't ask questions like that aloud. Not if you want to keep your chores predictable. After the meal, lentils and more lentils, you are allowed 1 free hour. You choose the scriptorium. Not for copying, just for sitting. It smells of ink and wax and patience. The scribe's chair is empty, a quill still resting in its groove. You trace the edge of the writing desk with your fingers, thinking how many women have sat here, illuminating not just parchment, but whole, invisible parts of themselves. A woman once told you that copying a manuscript was like leaving footprints in a world where no one remembered your name. You liked that. The candles flicker, and you remember a truth you've heard, but never seen. Some nuns deliberately made mistakes in their copying to remind themselves that only God is perfect. A comforting thought. You glance at a half-finished text and wonder if that smudged line was clumsiness or intention. As the sun slinks away behind the hills, the cloister sinks into shadow. You walk the perimeter once, as is custom. The cold bites now. Not a polite nibble, but a gnawing. You pull your hood low and think of warmer days that feel almost imaginary. Let's pause here gently to ask something. Does a life of quiet sacrifice count if no one remembers it? Or is it the act itself that gives it meaning? You suspect the answer is both yes and no, or neither, or something you'll only understand after a great many more jars of mashed goose fat and mysterious teeth. In the evening, you help Sister Odelia with her weaving. She hums as she works her voice, thin but steady. She's been here since she was 11. She's now 72. Her hands are crooked with time, but her work is flawless. You ask her once what she thinks of eternity. She answers, "It sounds very loud." You don't ask again. Night deepens. You press warm stones into your bed, an old trick. It barely helps. The wind whispers through the cracks in the shutters like it has something urgent to say, but keeps forgetting the words. You lie awake longer than usual. Not unhappy, just aware. Of the creaks in the floorboards, of the slow drip of water somewhere outside, of the sheer persistence of it all. And then sleep comes not like a sweet lullaby, but like a blanket tossed by a tired friend who knows you need it. By now, you know the routine of the bells before they ring. Your body stirs moments before the chime, not because you're eager, but because it has learned obedience through repetition. The cold meets you like an old acquaintance, familiar, unwelcome, and stubborn. Your joints creak like the wooden beams above, and your breath turns to mist before your eyes. Still, you rise. Today, the work is laundry. That noble, endless trial of cloth water and patience. You drag the bundles toward the wash house skirts, lifted just enough to avoid the worst of the morning mud. The sun is nothing more than a suggestion behind a gray sky, and the wind plucks at your sleeves like a bratty child demanding attention. The wash house is less a building than a glorified shelter, half open to the elements, damp and honest. Baskets of soiled linen already wait for you piled high and heavy. You kneel at the basin, cold water stinging your skin as you scrub. There's no soap, not really. Just ashes boiled in rainwater, soft lye sharp on your hands, but kind to fabric. You work rhythmically, muscles remembering the motion even when your mind wanders. A tunic, a veil, a towel. Someone coughed blood on this one. Someone wept into that one. Every cloth tells you more about the cloister than its silence does. Sister Apollonia works beside you, her elbows always wet, her humming slightly off-key. She tells a story, half whispered, half true, about a nun who once smuggled letters inside pillow seams. Love letters, if you believe the rumors. You wonder how many other stories cling to these threads. Laundry is intimate after all. It knows things people don't say out loud. Mid-morning brings a gust that knocks over a full basket. Sheets tumble out like startled ghosts, and you chase them across the yard, grumbling like a medieval windmill. When you finally pin them down, you're muddy, breathless, and a little triumphant. You wring one out slowly and notice a patch mended with mismatched thread, an old repair done quickly, probably at night. Probably by you. At midday, you eat outside. The sky pretends to clear. The bread is stale, the cheese chalky, but hunger has its own magic. You sit beside the laundry lines, watching the sheets flutter like sails. It feels like the most freedom you've had all week. A momentary illusion of movement in a life rooted to stone. After the meal, a novice asks how long it takes before the cold stops hurting. You smile with all the wisdom of someone who survived 3 winters here and say, "Ask me again in 10. She doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. That's fair. The truth is, there's no graduation. No end point where you've finally endured enough to be spared. There's just one more day, and one more wash basin, and the quiet miracle of not giving up. In the afternoon, you sew. Your fingers are still stiff, but Sister Magdala has sharp eyes and little sympathy. She says, uneven stitching is an offense against God's order. You wonder if he truly minds a crooked hem. Still, you try harder. A needle in, a needle out. A rhythm like breath, like survival. And here's a curious truth of the cloister. Even the smallest acts, mending a cuff, boiling linens, scraping wax from candle molds, carry a sacred weight. Not because they're glamorous, not because they're seen, but because they're done anyway. Evening falls early. Candles are lit. You fold the last dry linens by firelight, careful with the altar cloths. Sister Apollonia tells another story this time about a nun who embroidered hidden messages into the hems of garments. Blessings, warnings, poetry. No one ever found them, she says. Or maybe they were never meant to be found. That thought stays with you as you carry the folded cloths to the sacristy. It smells of incense and old wood, of reverence worn into the floorboards. You pause at the threshold, not quite ready to re-enter the hush. You trace your fingers along the edge of the folded cloth, thinking of all the invisible work stitched into it. Maybe that's the real prayer. As Compline approaches, you return to your cell. Your hands are raw, your back aches, and your hair smells faintly of vinegar and wind. But there's a strange peace in this exhaustion. Not the peace of rest exactly, but the peace of purpose, of knowing the day asked much of you, and you gave it. The bell rings. You whisper the psalms with the others. You bow. You kneel. You rise. And as the candles are snuffed, you lie down beneath a patched blanket, wondering not for the first time if heaven looks anything like clean linen and silence. Tonight, you dream of sheets unfurling in slow motion, like sails on a ship bound for somewhere warm. You don't know the destination. You only know it's far from here. But you stay anyway, because someone has to fold the cloth, mend the sleeve, chase the wind. There's something about the final vigil of the week that hits differently. The chapel feels heavier tonight, like the stones themselves are holding their breath. You sit on the cold bench eyes, half-lidded your voice, weaving into the chant that drifts upward like incense smoke. It's not exactly beautiful, but it's steady, familiar, and that counts for something. After the last amen, you don't rush to leave. You stay seated a moment longer, listening to the footsteps of the others fade into the corridors one by one. The candlelight flickers across the floor in long golden ribbons. You let your fingers trail along the edge of the bench, worn smooth by generations of cloistered hands. This is your corner of the world, tucked away behind prayers and discipline, behind silence and stone. And somehow, it's grown to fit you. Later in your cell, the fire has gone out again, of course. The cold greets you like an old complaint, familiar and impolite. You tug the wool blanket over your shoulders and sit in the dark, chewing slowly through the evening's dried apple slice. It tastes like shriveled sunlight. You make it last as long as you can. Tonight's quiet is different. Not empty, but full. Full of all the things left unsaid. The sisters' laughter in the garden after too much onion soup. The way Sister Brigida hums when she needs bread. The creak in the third step near the library. The feeling of bare feet on sun-warmed stone. All the tiny human things that make a life even here. And so you wonder, was this a prison or a sanctuary? A place where you were hidden or where you learned to see? Was this a place that stifled your voice or taught you how to whisper so that even the walls would listen? The truth, as always, lives in the in-between. For some women, the cloister was escape from marriage, from danger, from the mess of the world outside. For others, it was exile decided by fathers or uncles, sealed before they could read the vows they'd one day speak. And for a few, it was a choice not of freedom exactly, but of a different kind of power. The kind that comes from discipline, from routine, from shaping meaning out of restriction. It's strange how a place so small could contain such a wide world. You think of Sister Elween, who once taught you to write by candlelight using crushed berries and chicken feathers. Her fingers were twisted with arthritis, but she traced every letter like it mattered more than the stars. "This is how we stay alive," she said once. On paper, if nowhere else. You think of the garden, of dirt under your nails, of seeds buried and forgotten until they push back through the earth stubborn and green. You've always liked that part, and you think of the gate, That heavy iron-ribbed thing that never creaks, but always groans like it remembers every soul that's passed beneath it. You stepped through it once, full of fear, and maybe a little hope. You haven't stepped out since. But your mind, your thoughts, they have wandered, far and often. So now, lying on your straw-filled mattress, with your fingers still stained from ink, or herbs, or soap, or soot, you close your eyes and ask the question again. Was this a prison, or have you built something here? A rhythm, a way of being, a life cobbled together from rituals and relics and resilience. Tomorrow will begin as they all do. A bell, a breath, a task, a prayer. But for now, in this flickering silence, with the hush of centuries wrapped around you like an extra woolen blanket, you feel something gentle unfold in your chest. Something not quite joy, but close. Maybe you didn't choose this life. Or maybe you did. Or maybe choice isn't the point. Maybe the point is endurance. Maybe the point is singing even when the notes are cracked. Maybe the point is folding linens with hands that remember sorrow. Maybe the point is that you're still here, and that somehow is enough. And so here we are at the end of a long, quiet walk through cloistered corridors and candlelit kitchens, whispered prayers, and soft rebellions. You've traveled far without moving, haven't you? Through winter winds and dusty scripture, through silences deeper than any vow. You've walked in the shoes of women whose names never made it to the margins of history, let alone the pages. Yet they were here. They endured. And in their own way, they left behind something that lingers. You might never wear a wimple or wake before dawn for matins. You may never scrub the flagstones of a convent floor or stitch your thoughts into the hem of a tunic. But maybe, just maybe, you've glimpsed something tonight, a truth folded small, like a note hidden in a pocket. That survival doesn't always shout. Sometimes it hums quietly in the dark. So rest now. Let your shoulders soften. Let the world outside drift further away. The bells won't ring here. Not tonight. Only the hush remains. The kind spun from stories and breath, and the gentle knowing that you too have a place in the quiet. That's the story for tonight. May your dreams be filled with wonder and peace.